Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Motivated Property Podcast. It is Thursday, the 3rd of April, 2025. Hope everyone out there is having a fantastic week. So guys, it is that time of year again. It's time for the federal budget, right? So the federal budget came out last week on the 25th of March. And once again, I generally do approach the federal budget with a little bit of optimism before I actually read it. And then lo and behold, once again, I'm a little disappointed, right, in the lack of real changes that's going to be made, especially when it comes to property, right? And we will dig into that today, right? Now, obviously, there's a few things to diagnose and sort of go through here. So again, I'm going to cherry pick. I'm going to obviously pick the stuff that's more so relevant to our listeners, being those capitalists, property investors, business owners, and ambitious guys who want to be using capital in their own favor. Having said that, to start off with, there are some tax cuts coming, right? So this is one that I absolutely love and completely agree with, is the 16% tax rate. So that's earning $18,201 between $45,000. If you're in that tax rate, right now you're paying 16% tax on every dollar between those thresholds, right? Next year, as of the 1st of July 2026, that's going to go down to 15%. The year after, it's then going to drop to 14% in 2027. So I think this is fantastic. For those who've been listening to this show for long enough, I personally believe that our current tax system is an absolute scam. So the less tax that our citizens pay, particularly the low-income earners, I think is absolutely awesome. And the more the better. There is obviously some stuff around, healthcare and Centrelink and stuff like that. I'm not going to go through that today. Obviously, I've got some pretty negative opinions about giving off 20% loan reductions to HEX debts and increasing single parenting payments and things like that, which is in turn incentivizing Centrelink, but I'm not going to go there. For businesses. So there are going to be some tax cuts to sole traders. And again, I think this is a good thing, right? Trying to help sole traders essentially get their businesses established and into the market. Fantastic. In terms of fair trading, so one of the things that I think is going to be a really good thing if they can pull this off, is removing surcharges to debit cards, right? I mean, once again, right, just like the tax system is a scam, for those who've been listening, you would know that the banking system is an absolute scam as well. The fact that they are charging surcharges to use your own money, I think, is just an example of the fact that we are getting scammed on a daily basis. So it is under review right now with the RBA. I hope to the good Lord above that they remove it, and they ban all debit card surcharges moving forward, right? Again, I understand with credit cards a little bit different, right? It's not your money. They're also increasing super guarantees, right? So basically, as of the 1st of July, 2025, super guarantees go to 12% from the current 11.5, right? So again, I would imagine they're going to continue increasing that. In fact, when we look at the numbers, when you look at the data over the long term, we need to be putting substantially more into our supers in order for a super to actually work the way it's designed. I don't agree with it. I think I can use super far better outside of my super right now and invest to make way more money and benefit way sooner. But I think this is also, the government's way of essentially forcing people to do this for themselves. So in the future, they don't have to rely on Centrelink and obviously their welfare. Bulk billing, not really a lot to talk about. Medicare, they're obviously increasing the thresholds. Paying super. So as an employer, we've got to basically be able to pay super on a weekly basis from July 1st, 2026. Good thing is I did that weekly anyway, so that's all good. Not really going to impact me. For housing, right? And I think this is probably the more relevant for our listeners. When it comes to housing, right? So basically for renters, there's going to be a $4.6 billion boost to Commonwealth rent assistance. So this is essentially helping people rent. Once again, what the government is doing here is providing a band-aid solution for renters to, let's just say, assist with the cost of their living. Not really going to do anything to the housing market in terms of helping supply of housing, right? I mean, pretty bloody obvious. The Help to Buy scheme. So there's an additional $800 million that's going to be invested to broaden eligibility. Income caps from individuals is going to go from $90,000 to $100,000, and then for couples from $120 to $160. And then obviously the price caps will be linked to the average house prices in each state and territory. They're also going to be increasing up to 40% of government equity contribution. So this is a scheme that's essentially like a shared equity scheme, right? So you purchase 60% of the property, the government purchases 40%, so they're going to increase their percentage to 40% to help people get into the housing market. Again, I think that's somewhat of a good thing on the right track. Only problem is, I don't think that the government having share in ownership of your house is the best long-term solution for wealthy Australians. I think it's kind of going a bit of a dark direction. Once again, time will tell. The big one, housing supply. So the housing supply, they are going to build 1.2 million new homes over the next 5 years. And once again, they're going to fail to do that. All right, because there's no real planning, no real logic, there's no reality. So look, I've been saying this for the last couple of years. They keep saying this every year in the budget. They're going to be building X amount of million new homes over X amount of period, and they're continuously failing on missing those targets. Why? Once again, this is the government essentially saying, we need to be Big Daddy, we need to essentially take responsibility, and we need to fix the housing market. Once again, the government can never do that. They do not have the funding, they do not have the manpower, they do not have the resources in order to fix the housing supply. The only way the housing supply will be fixed is if we incentivize private investors to do it for us. Right now, around 90% of all investment properties are privately owned by private investors. So that's people like us, right? People like me and you, right? Who own investment properties. So once again, the government coming out and saying, oh, we're going to build 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years. Really? Look, let's just take the last 3 years worth of budgets into consideration. You've completely, let's just say you've completely failed and missed the boat on the last couple of years worth of hitting these targets. What makes this any different? I'm not really holding my breath on that one. They are going to also help with homelessness services, so $9.3 billion for crisis accommodation, another $1 billion for women and youth housing support. Okay, it's a good thing. They're going to be making some changes to prefabricated and modular construction. All right, so $49.3 million is going to be provided to states and territories to grow their prefabricated housing sector. An additional $4.7 million will go toward developing voluntary national certification scheme for offsite construction. Right, so once again, this is the government essentially saying, hey guys, housing is getting too unaffordable, things are going crazy. Let's now change the style of houses. So instead of having, builders come to your block and build a house, let's start looking at modular construction and prefabricated construction, incentivize that so that we can have a Band-Aid solution. Once again, I don't think this is going to be great long-term for Australians to be wealthy. I think this is another Band-Aid solution that's simply designed to appease us as people, shut us up, so the government can continue wasting our money in these budgets. Yes, you can hear sarcasm and cynicism in my voice, if you can't notice that already. Red tape reform. So there's $120 million from the National Productivity Fund that will incentivize states to remove planning barriers hindering adoption of modern construction methods. Once again, what an absolute waste of time and money. The federal government is saying, hey, we're going to incentivize and basically, create a body that's going to help remove the red tape. It's not about the red tape, federal government. It's about the local councils don't give a shit about your policy. They don't want to overpopulate and flood their suburbs with immigrants that you're importing. That's fundamentally what it comes down to. Now, again, I am absolutely pro-immigration. I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born in Australia. I was born in America. I moved here when I was 6 years old. The amount of immigrants that come here and make this country better is phenomenal, right? We have an immense amount of people from overseas here, and I think it is an absolutely great thing if we do it right. But once again, this is the federal government saying, hey, look, here's a solution to the problem here. We're going to create this national productivity fund that's going to go and save the world. And they're not listening to the local councils, right? It's the local councils that are refusing to change the zoning because they don't want to overpopulate the areas that they've got, because the areas are already thriving, they're already doing well. And if you go and rechange all the zoning, remove all these planning barriers, people can go and build willy-nilly in the suburbs and overpopulate areas and go and build triplexes on every friggin' block. Like, we simply don't have the infrastructure to keep up with that. Like, we don't have the ability to go and double the road sizes and double the car parks everywhere and double the shopping centres and double the capacity of all the schools all of a sudden. Like, it's just not how this shit works. So, again, this is $120 million in my mind that's going to be absolutely freaking wasted. One of the really good things, I think, though, construction workforce pipeline. So there are incentives to bring housing and construction apprentices. And so the incentive currently is $5,000. They're going to make that $10,000 from the 1st of July 2025. Absolutely fantastic. I think that's great, right? We need more tradies here. We need more skilled workers. And I think that's a really good way to do it. And that's, once again, this is a great example of the government not trying to fix this. The government is setting incentive structures and letting the market fix this. Right? This isn't the government saying, hey, we're going to go and, make X amount of brickies and we're going to go and hire X amount of this, that, and the other, and we're going to go provide the solution. What they're doing is they're putting an incentive in place with the design or the intention for that incentive to actually fix the problem. Fantastic, government. You finally got something right here. Infrastructure. All right, I'm not going to bore many people, but there is, for the cities that we are recommending property investment, so there's $7.2 billion in Queensland for the Bruce Highway upgrades, and $200 million for the Rockhampton Ring Road. In Victoria, so there's $2 billion for Sunshine Station, $1.1 billion for the Western Freeway. In WA, another $350 million for the Kawana Freeway. For those who live in Perth, you'll sort of understand that we live in a perpetual state of upgrading our freeways. So looking forward to another couple of years worth of roadworks on the Kawana Freeway. Yay. South Australia, $125 million for Curtis Road level crossing removal. So yeah, not really a whole lot is going to be changing or moving. It's just more so that's road infrastructure. So $17.1 billion over the next 10 years for road and rail. For the broader economy. So, and this is just looking at some stats in their projections, right? So this is essentially the government's modelling. So what they're saying is the wages and unemployment. So unemployment is forecast to reach 4.25 in this financial year by the time we end it. Wage growth is expected to rise to 3.25 by June 2026. So once again, wages are not increasing at the same rate as property. It never does. That is an illusion. That is one of those clickbait news politician, things that they just throw out to try and be a victim. The fact of the matter is, wages and property are not correlated. GDP growth, right? So forecast for the current financial year is 1.5% and then 2.25% next year. I'll believe it when I see it. Inflation is expected to ease to 2.5% by the end of this financial year. So it looks like it is on its way to doing that. Lo and behold, the budget deficit of $27.6 billion is forecast by the end of this financial year. Ongoing deficits projected over the next 4 years will create a cash deficit of $42.1 billion. So this is the irony of the entire conversation today. The government has announced a budget where they're spending millions and billions of dollars of our money, our tax money, to go and fix the country. Obviously, they're not fixing the country. In fact, there's an argument that some of this shit's going to make it worse. And yet, they can sit here and wave their flag that they're also increasing the deficit. So not only are they wasting our money, they're making us poorer, they're putting us into more debt, and they're not saving any problem or fixing really any problem here. Once again, I'm just going to leave it with we're getting scammed, but I'll leave it there. Unemployment. So the labour market is outperforming expectations with unemployment near historic lows at 4%, right, for 2023, 2024. And obviously, as I mentioned before, that's going to hit around 4.25 by the end of the financial year. So it looks like unemployment is slightly increasing. That is a fairly normal thing to see when we do have such high immigration rates. But again, we're talking about sort of push and pull mechanics there. And like I said before, when it comes to things like wage growth itself, is looking like it's growing around that kind of 3 to 3.2%. 3.25%. Considering that the national property market has grown well above 3%, again, I'm just trying to put proof in the pudding of the fact that wage growth and property growth are two different things. They're not correlated whatsoever. Despite the fact that the news, politicians, and everyone's running around with their head on fire, assuming that they're correlated. They're not correlated at all. So guys, like I said, that's basically a wrap up of the budget. I feel like I'm wasting my time here. I'll be honest. The budget, once again, I think is going to absolutely fail to deliver any solutions long term for us. I'm pretty confident that all this is going to do is continue rocketing the market, considering that they're not talking about immigration right now. They're not talking about slowing immigration. So the fact of the matter is, I would assume based off this, and if I'm reading between the lines here, I am assuming that they're going to continue with high inflation numbers. I'm going to assume that, right? And that's where, a lot of the tax revenue paying for this is coming from the future projections of the immigration. Other than the fact that the government's saying they're going to build 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years, and the fact they've lied about that year after year, I don't see any actual solution here to fix the supply issues. So when we look at, for example, WA, we look at, Brisbane, we look at South Australia, we look at Victoria, even Sydney for that matter, right? And we look at all the major cities, the 5 major cities. Like, unless we're gonna be incentivizing investment, unless we're gonna help people get into the market and supply housing to the market, like, all we're gonna continue doing is playing this game of, holy shit, house prices keep outperforming year after year. And, for guys like us who are paying attention to the market, taking advantage of the market, obviously we're going to become very wealthy over the next few years like we have been over the last couple of years. But the fact of the matter is, this budget is not actually fixing anything. This occurs to me as if it's just another one of those popularity ploys, right? To try and keep people happy, shut us up, keep people appeased, so that we continue to vote in the Labor government, we continue moving forward, and we just keep repeating this cycle of the government essentially getting bigger, trying to help more things, and miserably failing at doing that. So that's basically it for this week's wrap-up of the 2025 budget. We'd love to hear your feedback, guys. Have a great week.